Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to another lecture. I hope, again, you enjoy it. This is my second lecture ever, so hopefully we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it goes well. Sorry, my face is a little bleached out from the windows, but I think it's better to have some light in my house, so bear with me. So today we are going to look at the geographical origins and historiography of where the plague came from. I had you read a few different articles on where scholars believe it came from. And so in these articles, they discuss the historiography. So I said this before, but in case you are not aware of what it is, historiography is pretty much the history of history. So it is what other people have said about history. So it's scholars discussing other scholars' work. I have written a bunch of historiographical papers, and so your discussion this week is interested in the historiography and the origins of the Black Plague. So, sorry you can't see the picture up right here of JFC Hecker. It's because I'm up here, as you can see. So Justus Frederick Carl is the modern historiography of the Black Death began with him. He's a German medical historian, and he wrote The Epidemics of the Middle Ages in 1832. I would have the German for you, but we'll just stick with the English version of the name. So in this, he calls it Der Schwarze Tod, which means the Black Death in German. So what he says in his book, The Epidemics of the Middle Ages, is that in consequence of an universal pestilence, which extended from China to Iceland and Greenland. So he is arguing that the series of these great events began in the year 1333, 15 years before the plague broke out in Europe. They first appeared in China. So we're seeing that this idea that the plague broke out in China started around 1832. So as we've talked about before, the 19th century was a big time for looking at the Black Death, with epidemiologists coming up, really starting to use the term the Black Death, even though it was coined before. We start to see it really being used in the 19th century. And we are also seeing that this idea that it came from China is beginning in the 19th century. So according to our documents that we read, the discovery of the plague was in Hong Kong in 1894, with Alexander Yersin, which that's where we get Yersinia from, who was a Swiss physician, and Kitasatu Shibasuburo. Sorry, I can kind of pronounce Arabic and Turkish words and German, but with other words, not so great, so just bear with me. So Shibasuburo published first, according to our article that we read, but Yersin provided more accurate, complete description of it. So that's probably why it is named after him. We also have Paul Louis Simon in India in 1898, so not too long after, who is the one who proposed that this transmission of the disease came from rat to rat, flea to human. So as we see, the fleas on the rats to humans. So he's also arguing that this plague came from rodents, specifically rats. Then we have Dr. Wu Lin Te, who considered the whole of Central Asia kept alive by rodents. So he's saying that this whole area is kept alive by these rodents who are spreading this disease that we are seeing in this time period. Wu believes that Central Asia was the original home of the epidemic. So we're seeing that Central Asia is playing a key role in this spread of this disease. So important. William McNeill is actually a very important historian. I just taught, well, I didn't teach, I was a teaching assistant for world history, and our book was William McNeill. He's a world historian as well. So we see that his book that was published in 1976, I want you guys to pay attention to dates. Sorry to interrupt, but I really want you guys to pay attention to dates when these things are published, because it's important to see how it evolves, to see how these ideas evolve over time. So this is 1976, right? And he's claiming that the Black Deaths originated in East Asia with the Mongols. So he is using Chinese sources. Key to also pay attention to what sources they are using. He's using Chinese sources, and he's saying that origins began in Mongolia rather than passing with the Mongols through Yunnan in the 1250s. So his argument is that the bubonic plague is a disease of rodents. It spread to humans either directly from the rodents or indirectly from domestic rats. So he also argues that the African Indian foci of the plague, which is plague reservoirs, which is the bacteria and animal vector, date back to the beginning of the Common Era, so quite a ways beforehand. And then he says that the steppe reservoir of the disease dates from the 14th century. So he's saying it starts in the 1300s. And he also is arguing that it is spread by rodents. So he's saying that in ancient in India and new presence in Central Asia of the plague reservoir. In India and Africa, they are already experienced. He's arguing that they're already experienced with the plague. They've had it for quite some time. They know about the plague. Their bodies have gotten used to it. They are no strangers to the plague. And then he says that Mongol horsemen encountered the plague in the initial invasion of Yunnan in 1252 to 1253. So this is what McNeill is arguing and presenting. So then we have John Norris, not too long after 1977, and he's arguing that the Black Death did not originate in Central Asia, but in Kurdistan. So he believed that China and India, he did not, keyword, not believe that it began in China and India at the time. He believes that an absence of any firsthand description of the plague symptoms in Mongol sources and writings. And not much human so he's arguing that for it to spread, there's actually not that much traffic at this time for the plague traveling from east to west across the thinly populated Eurasian steppes. He is saying that there's not enough foot traffic from the Silk Road and from the places to actually spread this disease as they claim it did. So Norris contradicts McNeill about a Mongol-born assisted plague traveling from Yunnan to Mongolia to the Crimea in 3 ways. So number 1, as I said, there's an absence of any documentary evidence of the plague in Central East Asian steppes in the 14th century. So as we know, documents and texts are very important for historians. That's where we base a lot of our hypotheses and information on. So there's an absence of documentary evidence. Then he argues that the implausibility of the germ traveling across the thinly populated steppes, as I said kind of previously, at a time when the Silk Road and military relationships among parts of the former Mongol Empire diminished. So he's saying that the Silk Road isn't what it was, and that at this time it's not spreading as much as it would previously. And then he's noting the biological difference between the strain of plague endemic in Mongolia today and endemic in South China, where McNeill suggests that the Black Death originated, or in Southeast Russia, where it was first recorded. So take a look at this, pause it, take the notes, take it in, that this is where they differ, and this is the source, the ideas and the lack of sources. So then we have George Sussman, right? You read this article, 2011. So we have this quite a bit later. And in 2011, Sussman is looking at the Black Death, and he's saying it did not appear in India in the 14th century, despite the ties that link the Delhi Sultanate with Central Asia and the Middle East. He's saying it did not appear. He's also saying that China may not have experienced the Black Death, which is contrary to what we're hearing, right? So despite the interactions between the Delhi Sultanate and the plague-infected regions of the Middle East, which there is quite a bit of interaction, Central Asia and Western steppes, there is no record of significant epidemic in India during the years surrounding the Black Death in Europe and the Middle East. Most likely is what Sussman is saying. The explanation for India's avoidance of the Black Death is a combination of distance. I don't know why you need the hand gestures, but distance and geographical barriers and absence of appropriate vectors, rodents and whatnot, in a tropical environment. He says there is no direct evidence for the presence of plague in Yunnan before the 18th century, so the 1700s, so not the 14th century. Then we have Robert Hims, 2015, in the book by Monica Green, and he offers a tentative rereading of Chinese historical sources from the 13th century And he's calling for a new reading of these sources. We need to look at these sources and think out of the box, read a different way, and for ideas of what they may actually really be saying, unlike what other historians have said. So he proposes that the Mongols unwittingly carried rodents and their fleas eastwards into Jin and Song China. It is possible that plague moved from China to the Persian Gulf by sea, and it contributed to the European Black Death, which we'll learn more about, perhaps to the Middle East as well. So we may need to place the beginnings of the Black Death more than a century earlier than previously thought. So we see Robert Hims going the opposite way, right? We're saying it's going to be a century earlier in the 13th century, and that the Mongols did carry it, and that it moved from China to the Persian Gulf. So it is different from what Sussman is saying. So remember, this is in 2015. So Robert Hims also says that the Mongols, the expanding Mongols, they're expanding, throughout this area, are the agents of the plague. They're the ones spreading it. He places the critical moment not in their emergence from the steppe, nor in their passage through Yunnan into Sichuan 50 years later, but in their repeated assaults on and their conquest of a state that was next to them. So genetic evidence points not only to region, but well-defined period. I don't know how to pronounce this, guys, but Xia, I'm sorry, I should have looked into it, but Tangut people. So he's looking at this time, and the Mongols' choice to make Xia, please, if anybody knows how to pronounce this, tell me, because I don't. Their first conquest outside of Mongolia had huge consequences for the history of the medieval and modern world. So he's arguing that it's the Mongols and that they did spread it from Yunnan into Sichuan. So now we kind of get an idea, a little bit of the historiography and the dates when these were published, and an idea of how the plague spread according to these historians. We see there are some discrepancies, right? So always keep that in mind when we are studying this. And here, oh darn, let's go back. This is an image of Saint Sebastian interceding for the, sorry, I'm trying to move this thing. Will it move? There we go. So it's Saint Sebastian interceding for the plague stricken. So we see here that their bodies being taken away and people are, having issues, freaking out, if you will. And up here is Saint Sebastian praying and taking care, interceding on behalf of the plague stricken. So I hope that this was informative, and I hope it helped you guys learn a bit more about the Black Plague. I know we read about it, but I hope me talking about it helped you understand it a little bit better. I have your discussion topic post up, so please read that and make sure you understand what is required of you for this week. And if you have any questions or issues or problems, please feel free to email me. If you need anything, we can always talk through Zoom as well. You have 2 short lectures this week. I'm sorry to do that to you from now on. It'll probably just be 1. I'll try to keep them shorter because if you're anything like me, it's really hard to pay attention for a long period of time. So thank you guys so much. I really look forward to working with you, as I've said previously, and I hope you guys have a great one, and I hope this week goes by swimmingly. Thank you guys so much. Bye.